Good evening. We'll now reconvene to open session. I have just a few reportable actions taken in closed session. In regards to item 4A, the personnel summary was approved in closed session, and a copy is available at the table in the back room. In regards to item 4C, the liability claim is a resolution to be adopted as part of the consent agenda, item 18F. And in regards to item 4D1, the board approved in closed session a settlement of $60,500 for OAH case number 2018-03-0909. And I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits, with the following change. Item F, we'd like to remove for procedural reasons. We want to reconsider at a later time. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits, with the removal of item F?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that moved. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask two questions. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? And then I have the follow-up question. Are there any, would anyone like anything removed from the consent agenda for public consideration? What's wrong?
Can't hear you.
Oh, really?
To the microphone.
Oh, you can't hear me at all? Okay. So I'll ask the AV person. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Otherwise, I wouldn't call you AV person. But.
No.
Can everyone out there hear us? I almost broke this.
Can you hear me now? I'll get it closer.
I can turn it up more.
Thank you. So do any of the trustees have an item on the consent agenda you'd like removed for open consideration, further consideration? No? No public comment on the consent agenda? In that case, I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Mary?
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Resolution.
Aye.
Ms. Luskin Harlander?
Aye. Now we'll move on to trustee reports. I do want to note that we realized later that we don't need a strategist update. We no longer have a strategist. So in future agendas, that'll be removed. But we start with the Marin County Joint Legislative Advisory Committee. I guess that means we'll start from this end and move down.
Those, the JLAC meetings have ended in May. So we are to resume in, I believe, August, or is it September? So those meetings have concluded.
Okay.
Nothing to report there. And similarly, the Marin County School Boards Association will resume in August for its yearly meeting that'll probably be held somewhere locally in a restaurant, as it has in the past. What else? Do you want me to go ahead?
Maybe what we'll do, maybe we'll go through these items, and then we'll open it up, and each trustee can add additional information that we think other trustees need to hear. So, Laura, Michael, do you have anything to report on the Fiscal Advisory and LCAP Committee?
No, we meet in a week, June 19th.
Okay.
And I'm Golden Bell.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Thank you, Lars. And very well attended. We had a nice message from Jared Huffman, and it always feels great to honor our excellent staff. We were well represented, TAM District.
So, thank you. So maybe we will start now. do you want to start, Michael? Do you have anything you need to
No.
report to the trustees?
Nope.
Laura, anything in additional that we need to hear about?
No.
And Barbara?
To be honest, I don't recall if I reported out on the delegate assembly. I don't think that I did last time.
No, I don't think you did.
Just to let you know that the kinds of things that we have been concerned about continue to be brought forward in the larger group. We particularly looked at, in small discussion groups for feedback, we particularly looked at the implications for legalizing marijuana in our communities. We also looked at, broadly, issues of safety. That broad category brought out some political, some NRA, some triggered experiences for many of the constituents in those meetings. I think we have a lot more to look at there, obviously. We will come back in November to renew our commitment particularly with legislation. I think we've seen that Jared Huffman, in collaboration with 2 other legislators, is trying to give us some assistance in terms of how we are going to reconcile at least or get some kind of revenue stream to compensate for our, I believe it's special education. So that's in the works, as are the other issues that we have raised, i.e. the pension liability issues. So that's ongoing, but we need to keep that before the public because those are areas that are out of our control, but we are certainly, I don't want to use the word victimized, but certainly are subject to those waves of financial constraints on us. Enough said.
Thank you. Chuck, do you have anything to report to the board?
Just one item of note. I had a conversation with Supervisor Dennis Rodoni a few weeks ago. The county is interested in, there is some interest in acquiring our property out in the San Geronimo Valley in Woodacre. And there is money. So they can, it's a very convoluted process. But there is interest, and, it should be something we look at.
So who will follow up on that? Are you handing that off to the superintendent, or what's the plan?
The superintendent could call Supervisor Rodoni, or I could have Supervisor Rodoni call the superintendent.
Maybe come up with an action for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's good news.
Do we have any idea how much that parcel is worth?
The golf course just went, and the value of the golf course is land alone. That went for $8-point-something million. The school property, the useful part of it is quite a bit less than the golf course, but it should be worth $2-3 million at least. It's a big chunk of property.
So, there are significant statutory restrictions for
Yes.
public
Right.
school districts selling real estate.
Yes, it's a very convoluted process.
Right, and so, and it takes a long time because there's a sort of a waterfall of uses, uses and to whom, what kind of, it has to be offered and made available to different kinds of people, so it doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
There's no.
Is that a process that also would have some fiscal implications just to proceed?
Probably. I don't think the transaction costs are that high necessarily. But in other words, it's prioritized for, this one is currently not being used as a school, but I know that so when I was on the Larkspur School Board, we had a property that is leased to a private school, and there were some inquiries about whether the private school might want to purchase it, and it became exceedingly difficult to make that. It didn't really make sense ultimately, but it became exceedingly difficult to make that happen because of the statutory restrictions on how real estate owned by public school districts needs to be disposed of. But it's right, I've never heard anybody mention that we have any plans to make use of this property,
Right.
right?
No, there is a desire on the part of some. The property was taken from the Flanders family in the 1950s, I think it was, with the intention of building a school. They were paid fair market value, but it was an eminent domain process. They were paid fair market value then. They want it back. There's malt money that could make it happen. They obviously can't buy it, and there's a desire on the part of the county to make them whole again. But still, whatever malt came up with, it would have to be at least as much as anyone else is willing to pay. It's pretty impossible to develop that property now.
Leslie, may I make a comment? May I make a comment?
Yeah.
We actually own a second piece of property. Many, many years ago, we were bequeathed a building lot in Bolinas, a very small, oddly shaped lot. Recently, I received a letter from the adjoining landowner inquiring if we'd be willing to sell it to him. Actually, Walt Buster, many years ago, apparently gave him permission to put some outbuildings on it that are currently there. So I'm having it appraised. All this will be brought forward to you in a memorandum form, but I'm having it appraised. And because it sits in a coastal zone, I've applied for an exemption to allow the board to consider selling it, but it can only be sold to the immediate adjacent landowner because it's in a coastal zone. So you'll be getting information on that, if not in the June board meeting, in the July board meeting. It'll be it's a lot, not acreage, and it'll be a much smaller sum of money than that acreage potentially is worth.
Thank you, Lars. For the board president's report, I'll combine information with my message. I know you're aware that it was several weeks ago that we approved a contract with Communication for Education expert, and they're definitely full on board now. It's a very quick burn. They were first doing a thorough evaluation and don't have access to confidential information, but are able to get on all of the websites and looking at how many hits and looking at the communication, but they already are providing some very good feedback, and they'll be coming to the board in July, end of July. And it's, we do not, as you know, have a public information officer. We don't have, community outreach, and we didn't want to go with a community outreach firm that just does community outreach. So we went with this specialty firm that really knows education. And already I just want to report to the board that some of the information that we've already gotten from them is very high quality. And I think it will really help us overcome our communication issues with our staff and with our community. So I'm looking forward to that. That's really the main thing, is that as we move into the summer and school's out, there's going to be much more of a emphasis on, just looking at some of our practices so we're ready to hit the ground running, when school's back in session. So we'll move on now to public comment. This is a time of the agenda that the board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to make a public comment on any item that's not on the agenda? We do not. So, this is the beginning. Now's the time that we're going to hold a public hearing for Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, with Tamalpais. That was an adjournment. Did I not say that? I hear some whispering from the former presidents at the end of the table.
No,
Always
not
give me a
for me.
clue. Okay.
It was a
Can you
recess,
open
too.
the?
Not an
Recess.
adjournment, it was a
Oh,
recess.
thank you.
No,
Okay.
the
Okay,
other
thank you.
public hearing. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so we present the LCAP for public hearing. It has been posted on our website, and it was posted in the IJ and in many places around the district.
Now we return to the meeting. Now we're time to, we'll have a recess to hold a public hearing on the proposed budget for 2018-19. I suppose that's you, Terry.
You were a little
Yeah,
bit
your
off.
name's on the agenda actually for that. So
Yes,
then-
similarly, a public hearing was noticed. The County Office of Education actually does that for all the districts, noticing their board public, or their budget public hearings. And likewise, the budget was available online and physically if anybody were to come in and ask.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're reconvening now, and now we'll go to trustees' consideration.
Leslie, can I just jump in? Did we skip over superintendent's report?
I am so sorry, Dr. Yoshihara. I'm continuing how I was in closed session. I need more coffee, so I apologize.
No worries. Just, I think in the essence of time, I'm going to skip most of it, but I just want to share my thanks to our teachers, our classified, our admin for really the end of a successful year. We had lots of stuff going on, and we're just about at the end. We got a few days left and lots of celebration and graduations happening. So appreciate the good times, and hats off to all the hard work to our staff and administration in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Topier, would you like to provide the report on goals, teaching and learning, equity and access, and student wellness?
Yes. So, good evening, everybody. So, as you know, in education, you don't ever get to live in the year you're in. So, in that essence, we are looking forward to next year, and we have, once again, we will be offering a professional development week, the week of August 13th through the 17th. We have 11 teachers. We have 23 workshops being presented for staff. They're being led by 11 teachers and 4 administrators and 1 classified staff person. They occur between about 8 and 3:30 on each of the days, and we will publish out each workshop. We'll publish this out so that you can stop by if you have time to see any of the topics. It's a wide range of topics from ed tech to incorporating art and creativity. And then our coaches will all be offering various workshops on instructional strategies, and Kim and I will also both be presenting. And we will also be presenting, providing an opportunity for more teachers to get trained on our sexual harassment prevention training for students. So that's exciting. We have that up and running.
Do you have any feedback about how how it worked for students, the sexual harassment?
We did. We
Classes.
asked teachers for feedback, and we've gotten really valuable feedback. And in fact, Francie Salad at Drake had her students come up with scenarios that she then shared with us that were really relevant for them. So that was great. We've had a lot of the feedback was very positive. And the teachers were great, and I have to say, again, a shout out to the social studies teachers. We also captured, I was just sharing with Corey earlier today, we estimate that 4,600 of our 4,800 students have received sexual harassment or affirmative action training.
Wow.
So that was, they picked up the mantle and ran with it, and I really do appreciate that they did that. And so we provided materials and the learning goals, and we said, you can, as long as you meet these learning goals, do what you want. So we had people who sort of approached it in a lot of different ways. A lot of teachers were able to embed it they were doing civil rights units, so they embedded it in those units and U.S. history. And so we got a lot of positive feedback. And we've also, just today, put out our Title IX survey to staff, and we've already received nearly 150 responses And overwhelmingly, one of the things that's been requested is more training for students. So we will continue to provide that.
Any other comments or questions from board members?
Board
No.
members are welcome to go to that professional development.
Absolutely, that's why I say I will send that out to you. And while I have you, I also, I think I sent an email, but it's June. On Monday, August 13th, is our new teacher orientation, and we invite all board members to lunch at noon on that day with our new teachers.
Very good.
Yeah. Mike?
Will the professional development be open to teachers from other districts, or feeder districts?
Yeah, we usually wait to see what kind of attendance we get, and then we send it out. We're getting out later than our feeders this year, so that's a little hard, but we usually do blast it out to them and allow them to sign up.
Okay.
Thank you, Tara.
Sure.
Appreciate that. And next we have Tara. I waited till you had a seat.
Very dramatic, the walk away, the come back.
You're in trouble today.
Oh, my goodness.
Right, LCAP update. Thank you, Erin. Okay, so tonight I'm going to present the update to our local control and accountability plan, along with some of the data that we've used to evaluate our action steps. This is, what we're doing tonight is just the update. Last year you approved the LCAP for 3 years, so in 2 years' time we'll be approving a whole LCAP again. So that it gets approved in 3-year waves. So just a reminder of what the California's 8 state priority areas are, and that we are required to have goals and action steps that address each of these areas. These are the dashboard metrics that are used. This is how, how the indicators are broken out. So our annual LCAP cycle looks a little bit like this, and that we have goal planning, and because we are updating, our goals are not changing this year. So we were in the implementation process and data gathering. And then what we do is we come back and we look at that data and we say, how are we doing? Are these action steps working? And sometimes what we'll do is add new action steps or change action steps to address the goal without actually changing the goal. So I'll point out one of those changes that we made this year, which is a new action step. So it's an iterative process. It looks a lot like the cycle of inquiry that teachers do to measure the impact of their learning. So it's the same thing. We're measuring the impact of our actions and our goals on student learning. Is it having the impact we intend it to?
To what extent did the LCAP budget group participate in this update, or is it separate from?
No, we did look at the goals and we reviewed the goals and we did show them the data from October. We didn't really meet enough to have a lot of input on action steps this year. We meet again next Tuesday, and one of the recommendations that Dr. Yoshihara, Lars, and I will bring forward is that we split that committee into 2. We really see the work of an LCAP committee as different from a fiscal advisory committee. Because really an LCAP committee, one, should be larger and more inclusive, and so we're going to try for that. And I think it needs to meet more often and on a little bit of a time frame, a different time frame. So, we've laid out I think the LCAP committee next year will meet 5 or 6 times, and those will be aligned to when we get our CASP results, right? So it's a little bit of a lagging indicator, but in October, we really need to get together and say, okay, this is a big piece of data. These are big pieces of information we use to see how we're doing. So that's a good time for the LCAP committee to meet and say, okay, how did we do? Do we need to make adjustments? So meeting a little more in the fall and then making recommendations in early winter so that we would have input on an update by April.
Okay. Two questions, perhaps not related, but then how is that going to interface, though, with budget issues? I mean, they're
Yeah.
not isolated.
No, they're not. And so the Fiscal Advisory Committee, I think, is more geared at actually looking at financials. I think what we realized this year is that those are two different groups of people. People who want to look at, often that want to look at student programming and curriculum are not necessarily your fiscal people or your budget people. They tend, so one of the ways we are planning to do that is have overlap, a little bit of overlap on those committees. So we would have representation, a few people that would represent on both committees, so that both committees are aware of what the other, so that the way I envision it is that the LCAP committee would inform the Fiscal Advisory Committee of here's the programming that we are recommending. And the Fiscal Advisory Committee, I think, would have to look at, okay, what does that mean for our financials?
Okay, and perhaps not my last question, but my concern is that whenever we had these committees, and this is not just now, that we tend to burn out our community members if we're not as prepared as, and so on.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many more folks we're going to have to bring into this process because people have fallen away, because they're disenchanted, or?
Well, we need to bring more people into LCAP because there are requirements of what
Right.
representation we need that we haven't been able to secure, not for a lack of trying, but we need to
Yeah.
continue those efforts and bring some more people in.
Okay.
But it is going to increase the size of, having two committees. The LCAP
Yeah.
committee will probably be 28 people, and I think Fiscal Advisory will be somewhere around 19.
It's a lot of people to get.
It is,
Involved.
and that's part of the process, right? That's parent engagement, is having parent and community engagement in an ongoing process that we can lay out from the get-go, here's the 5 meetings, here's the purpose of each meeting, here's the purpose of the committee and the goals and what you'll be, the deliverables you'll be asked to do.
And that'll be when, October, or by
No,
September?
yeah, by September.
By September, so that'll be out by September.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to share what we heard you were on a conference call with the communication team and how they described interfacing with these committees, that it's two-way engagement, but it really is to listen and listen to the viewpoints, but really it is still,
Yeah.
you make the
We
decision.
make decisions, right.
And so
They're recommending.
making sure they're clear of that, and it sets expectations at the appropriate level and keeps the
Right.
process moving. So,
Yeah, I think it's important that they know up front that,
Yeah.
these are recommending bodies. Yeah. Okay. So this is just a quick overview of our four LCAP goals. And in goal 1, I just wanted to be clear that goal 1 is really around the access to engaging in broad course of study. So this is where we talk about our courses of study, our A to G rates, teachers being highly qualified, facilities, things like that. In the LCAP committee, we did discuss whether or not we wanted to add either an action step or a goal around facilities, and we ultimately decided no, that while we are adding portables, that it really wasn't at this space. We think if we were looking at bonds, then it would be important to have an LCAP goal around those facilities, but at this point, we didn't reach that conclusion. But there are some updates. As you know, we did get the you approved Physics in the Universe course, which is the first of the new science, next generation science standards courses. This will begin implementation in the fall with all incoming 9th graders. It has been approved as a UCD lab. This is, I think, a change that the community will ultimately really like once they realize that, in our current system, you couldn't get a D lab credit until the end of your sophomore year if you were taking just regular curriculum without taking a second science. because integrated 1 through 4 counted as one Lab D, whereas now our ninth grade, the conclusion of ninth grade students who successfully finish physics in the universe will have a UC Lab D credit.
And we've been articulating with our feeder schools.
Yeah,
right?
we're in a county-wide consortium around the next gen implementation. So the task force will continue with a new set of lead teachers this coming year, and they will be writing the new curriculum and new course of study for the second year course, which is called the Living Earth, which is largely a biology-based course, but they're all a little more integrated. We also have our next generation history social science task force that's been working all year. If you remember, we have a new framework, but not new standards. So it's more about how you're teaching, but it is also a little bit more of what you're teaching. And this one is very focused on critical thinking and critical application skills. And so we are focusing on what are known as the Big Six social science critical thinking skills. And we've been working on learning progressions and success criteria or rubrics for those Big Six, and that is going to continue next year. We've also got our ethnic studies course of study approved by both you and UC, which was exciting, and that course will be implemented for the first time this fall at Tam High. And just a recollection that by the year 2021, we are going to be required to offer it. Kids don't have to take it, but we're required to offer it, so we're ahead of the game.
How was TAM selected as our pilot site?
In the NGSS task force, which had admin representation and teacher representation from each of the sites, TAM felt the most prepared to, and two of the TAM High social studies teachers also helped with the course of study development, so they felt most ready to implement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, there is, I assume, a reading list for the ethnic studies course?
There is, and it was in the course of study.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There is.
Sorry?
Yeah.
What's the connection between the NGSS task force and the ethnic studies program?
It's the NGHSS task force and ethnic
HSS,
studies.
sorry.
These are two different, and it's just really long to type it out, but this is the next generation history social science task force that worked on the ethnic studies course of study.
Got it. Not bad.
We did not have our science teachers write our ethnic
I didn't-
studies course of
making
study.
the connection. Thank
Not that I don't think they could have done it, I'm just saying they did. They had their hands full with physics in the universe.
Tara?
Yeah.
How would you characterize the difference, or if you will, the step up for history, social science teachers? Because my experience is that this district has led
Yeah.
in many of these practices. So how much of a big change is this for our social studies teachers, in fact?
For a lot of our teachers are already doing this, and the advanced placement, European and U.S. history are also aligned to this now. They've done revamps of those courses. So we've had a lot of teachers implementing this, and a lot of teachers sort of implementing it on their own. So it won't be a necessary change for individual teachers. It'll be a systemic change where we will now be writing it into the course of study, so it will become part of the expected requirement and learning understandings that students will get, whereas right now it's not.
Would that also have some implication for evaluations of teachers in those departments?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, these are going to be part of the course of study, so it's that you're properly implementing the course of study, and I think it also provides us a uniform assessment. Like, we are working on, these success criteria or rubrics that all teachers will be able to use, so it can ground us in really understanding what a high level of competence in this skill looks like. And then Curriculum Council will continue to meet next year. We are going to put a pause on new courses of study that are not, we will do the Living Earth, but given sort of the fiscal circumstance, landscape, so we'll continue to do the work, we'll continue to update courses of study, and that alone is going to have our plate pretty full. We have a lot of courses of study to update, but we're just going to put a pause on new courses that are not within the sort of pipeline already.
Another question. Will the Curriculum Council be involved with criteria for textbook selection or text selection?
Yes, they do. Instructional materials is also part of the Curriculum Council work.
Okay, because
But largely those recommendations come from the teachers. So we rely heavily on, if there's a teacher in a department that wants to use a text, like a supplementary text, or in the English department, there's usually a process where they have it vetted by a group of English teachers who then either make a recommendation or don't, that book be adopted.
could some of that process could the board be informed about some of those criteria and some of those processes?
Yeah, and we have it, I can bring that up to the board. There is criteria established.
Okay, because there was brought to my attention a concern over some text selections, and I think maybe it would be helpful for all of us to have, just the basics of how that operates. Because that's the kind of stuff that board members hear from community members.
Can you remind me who's on the Curriculum Council?
Sure. The Curriculum Council has one teacher representative from each department. So I think we have 10 departments. So we make sure we have so it's one district rep, so there's one social studies teacher, one English teacher, and we try to ensure a balance among the sites. We also have, Kim and I both sit on it, and then there are 3 administrators. So 10 teachers, the 10 teachers include a librarian and a counselor, and then 3 site admin, including David Luongo, who represents the alt schools.
And are the teacher reps, how are they selected?
So they have been TLs. And so with the pausing of TL, we put it out to those that are on Curriculum Council now. If they wanted to stay, they could stay. And if they wanted to cycle off, that they and their co-teacher leaders would talk to their department members and see if there was someone else who wanted to cycle on. So we have a combination next year of existing members and some new members coming on. For example, I think Susie Maxwell is going to be the new art representative.
Do they get release periods to be on this council?
No, this is an after school. They get paid for their time, but it's an after school.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Moving along. Okay.
Oh, you're not done. I am so sorry.
Oh, no. This is just goal 1. I'll go faster. So what I do want to highlight overall is, in a broad sort of sense, it appears that our action steps are working. We are seeing improvement, particularly among our student groups. So unduplicated is a tough term to understand, but it's basically students who are historically underserved. It tends to be students from low socioeconomic status backgrounds, English language learners, foster and homeless youth. And so we have seen increases in their achievement, increases in that student group's participation in advanced classes, and UC completion rates and in graduation rates. So that's all been a positive. And just some ongoing work in this area. As you know, expansion of AVID. We will have AVID 9, 10, 11 next year. And those have been within our existing staffing ratios, so that's good. Those are all UC approved as electives, which is helpful.
Tara,
Yes,
could you go back a slide? Please?
sure.
The reference to the math courses are at
Yeah.
grade level or above. I know this was quite a significant issue several years ago, and I'm just wondering how many students are enrolled in
In Algebra Foundations?
Yeah, and in the below grade level math course now as opposed to, say, 2 or 3 years ago?
Oh, I don't know a comparison. I can look that up. But it's not a lot of students who are in it. You know, I think we have probably, I would say fewer than 100 students are enrolled across the entire district in Algebra Foundations.
Is it your sense that we've made meaningful progress in this particular area?
I do. I think SB 359 has helped, and the work of the math task force. You know, so Senate Bill 359 was that we have to evaluate all incoming ninth graders in math and make sure they're appropriately placed. And the point of that is to sort of, as they say, push up, not pull down. So that has helped identify more students to be pushed up. But I can get that data for you, like what percentage of ninth graders are in foundations now as compared to a few years ago. Sure. Okay, so we're continuing with a lot of work that we've been doing because it seems to be having an impact. We continue with our math articulation at Willow Creek. We continue to provide ongoing support for our English language learner team, which was created a few years ago. A really bright note there is that our English language learners particularly at Redwood, where the team is really just a very small group of people, and Debbie McCrae is leading that team, and she's doing an amazing job. They've seen like tremendous growth in their English language learners this year. So we're really going to try to capture what they were doing because they had really amazing success. And so Kim's really focusing on that and looking at sort of systematizing that approach across the district. Compass at TAM is a collaboration with College of Marin. And what's nice is Compass you have sort of Compass and Avid, and they serve two different groups, but they do similar work, which is sort of raising awareness around college and college readiness and providing those skills. And then the Success Network program at TAM, this is a new addition to our LCAP. This operated this year as in a sort of pilot program with a partnership with Marin Promise. And essentially, through the support of the Tam High Foundation, we employed Elizabeth Stoner to basically track some of our lowest performing ninth graders at TAM, ninth and 10th graders, on a weekly basis. So she literally had a spreadsheet and she tracked attendance, grades, missing assignments, contacts with counselor or like Bridge the Gap. So she had this weekly this weekly list that was then shared out with a small group of people that were the support. Some of our 10,000 Degrees, Bridge the Gap, the counselors, the administrators, if there was a special ed teacher involved. And it was really great. It was sort of really raised the level of awareness of where some kids that were already struggling, were really struggling, and provide really timely support. We've had a lot of success with that, so we are going to continue that program next year at TAM.
Who will supervise, if you will? There are so many support programs, particularly at TAM.
Yeah.
Who?
Well, so
looks that-
what's nice about this is we realized that Elizabeth and Success Network kind of became the hub, and it became the central point of communication. So it was the place, and she holds weekly meetings too, or bi-weekly meetings, so not bi-monthly meetings, where they all come together. So it really has also sort of coalesced the various support programs and community-based organizations.
How do they report out to the public? Is there any,
How does Success Network?
or any of them for that matter, does it get fed
yeah.
into some kind of newsletter or?
I know
Is that
that Bridge the
appropriate?
Gap has a newsletter, and so does 10,000 Degrees. I don't know how widely those are distributed. And, moving forward, Success Network will probably be something we'll communicate out in our Ed Services Express.
Oh.
But it's pretty new, but it's been a really positive addition.
I have a question. I love all these supports at TAM. I'm wondering if there's been any discussion about expanding Compass, for example, or the Success Network at the other sites.
We looked at Compass at the other sites, and at the time it wasn't really a fit. I have talked with Elizabeth Stoner about expanding. And that is, I think, something that we are looking to expand in the future.
Okay.
Once we're sort of working out some glitches on making it easier for her to access some of this data, and I think once that happens, she can expand.
Are there any feeder schools besides MLK and Willow Creek that are disproportionately represented in the foundations class?
Not at that level. It used to be Belina Stinson, but not anymore. Yeah. Okay. So here's some of the positive data I promised you. So I think, some of this was really affirming for some of the work that we've been doing. This has stayed pretty steady, which is interesting, but I think the completion of the UC is very positive for us, which I think I can make an assumption, I can't make a direct connection, but I think an increase in our UC eligibility means we're getting more kids through the math successfully. But it means that they're getting through all the requirements successfully, so it's working well. I struggled with how to make this a more reader-friendly chart, but essentially I just wanted to show that we also had an increase overall in our CASP, our standard or Smarter Balance scores, pretty much across the board, which is another piece of data for us for Goal 2. And you saw this data in the fall. So for Goal 3, which is our communication goal, we have finally implemented the integrated app, and I think we have about 800 downloads of that now, so we'll be launching more communication around that in the fall. Something that we did at the admin level that I think has been really helpful for us, but we've also had surrounding districts ask if we would share it, is that we just compiled, we started to have certain communications that were continuously going out. So we started to compile them all in one shared folder so that we have a set of templates around certain scenarios and circumstances that we can go to so that, as we know, we don't do our best thinking and, when you get the text at 11 o'clock at night that something's happened. So this has been a really helpful, I think, in providing consistency with our communication across the district. And we also came to agreement that pretty much if one principal sends anything, all of them do, to some degree, and it's the same. If they're all going to send it, they send the same letter with some tweaks to make it personal. Just trying to make sure that everyone gets communicated with. And again, we had our Fiscal Advisory and LCAP committee, as I shared with you earlier. We will be breaking that into 2 committees next year. And then the addition of our Ed Services quarterly newsletter, which was a way for us to communicate out professional development opportunities, but it was also a way for us to communicate out various opportunities that were going on in wellness with our coaches. It's just a way to stay connected, I think.
What's the name of that app that we talked about it a long
Yeah,
time?
it's the Blackboard.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that one.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have updated data on this one yet, but I will in the fall. We are administered the Healthy Kids Survey. It's closing now. We did it this spring. And again, we did the students, the parents, and the staff. Because I know, Chuck, you had asked about the climate survey, and the new staff survey for the Healthy Kids is the old climate survey. And of course, we did administer our Title IX survey as well, which that data will be available in the fall too. So update for Goal 4, which is our wellness and health. As you know, we have implemented a counseling and wellness program now at the 3 comprehensives. And I think we just hired the TAM High Outreach Coordinator for the fall. And We have a new chronic absenteeism policy that went into place in January. And we're working on heightened communication at the start of the school year around that policy, around, sort of the importance of attendance for that.
I, of course, have a question about that. When I read the WASC report, there were comparisons to all the schools with respect to absences. Is there any validation for the fact that because there is a new attendance policy or a chronic absenteeism policy that's been implemented, are we tracking better, and therefore are we seeing more absences? Have we played around with that idea?
I haven't tracked any of the data yet.
Because I am concerned that there is a trending at all the three main sites for increast absences.
I think heightened communication, for us, one of the interesting pieces was we had a really big increase in excused absences.
Yes, I saw
So
that.
I think that this new chronic absentee policy will address that. I think when parents are really clear that it doesn't matter, like calling it and excusing it is not going to mitigate this. I think we will see a difference.
Thank you.
We've also been implementing some professional learning on what is known as ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. This is also known as trauma-informed education, and making sure that students are in a space where they can learn. Drake will be continuing with their restorative practices work, and of course the implementation of our sexual harassment prevention workshop for all students, which will be an annual, ongoing piece of work.
Okay, I have another one. On the ACEs, are we looking at that in terms of the texts that we are selecting for children to read?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, and we kept it in our minds, and we developed the sexual harassment prevention module for students, and we reached out to counselors in particular ahead of time to say, hey, we're doing this. If you know of students who might be triggered or something, we really tried to build in some measures so that students, who have had an adverse experience would have an alternate setting, or, not have to be included.
Thank you.
So our latest chronic absenteeism rate information is slightly better. It's a little improved. It's not great, but we're, I think last year at this time, African American chronic absenteeism rate was 30%. So it is improving, but we have a long way to go. So, as I said, we are working on that. It's interesting that we have an overall graduation rate that's considered extremely high, but we have dropped slightly, 0.1%, and over the last 3-year trend. And again, the checks data will be updated in the fall. This data is a little more concerning and an area of focus. So what I do want to share with you is when the 5x5 rubric and the equity reports came out from the state, which is part of the data system that they now use. I did download all of the PDFs for the principals and sent them their school data and asked them to specifically pay attention to the suspension data and come up with plans for next year. Because we have some concerning suspension data, and we know from experience this year that data is going to look worse next year. So we are working on it. And then this is just another way of looking at the suspension data, which I thought was interesting. This sort of shows you the proportionality or disproportionality, how we're going to look at, of suspension data.
So do we have longitudinal information about this? I mean,
We don't have, this is the first year that we've had all of this data. So we will start getting some more longitudinal data broken out like this in the coming years.
but I do recall having discussions a few years ago, right, about this and about how making a deliberate effort to reduce the number of suspensions and expulsions, and we're not.
We
track that?
we have tracked that, yeah, and we have overall, over the past sort of 5 to 7 years, we have decreased
Yeah.
significantly our suspension rate, specifically of certain student groups. So we are tracking that. While we've decreased, those student groups still remain high, particularly our African American student groups.
So there's more work to be done.
There's more work to be done. And I think there's still some more, that part of that is finding the right work. I don't think we've all landed on exactly what approach we want to take. We're still sort of researching best practices. We've got some restorative practices going on, but we need to really dive in and choose one path.
The increase in suspensions this year, is that centered mostly on one school, or is it across all three of the big schools?
I know we've had an increase at TAM. I can't speak to whether or not the other two sites have had a noticeable increase, but I know that at TAM we have.
Isn't that characteristic at times of student populations that move in the ninth grade year, that may be a more challenging group of youngsters, because that goes in waves?
It does, and this year we did have, ninth grade
Yes.
had a higher rate of suspension than normal down at TAM. Okay.
Any further questions? Chuck? No, Chuck, no questions? I just couldn't tell. Questions?
No.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Terry. So you're next for the proposed budget and related reserves.
And while she's preparing, I want to thank Kate for being here tonight as well from the county office. We know Tarina is doing some other duties, so we appreciate your support and help.
Kate's here relaxing. She just did her public hearing to her school board this afternoon, so
Good.
I know this was her next favorite place to be. Thanks, though.
Can you hold your thought just a moment? The former presidents pointed out another problem I had, thankfully. Do we have any public comment on the LCAP? So I guess I'm looking at no comment. Okay, thank you. So, thank you. I do appreciate that. Glad we don't have.
Welcome.
So good evening. So tonight, we are going to discuss the proposed adopted budget. Tonight's just the public hearing and the discussion presentation. Of course, you'll take action on both the LCAP and the budget in 2 weeks. So we just want to talk about a little bit of where we are with the district budget overall. My brief, where are we in the state budget process? Talk about assumptions, taxes, the budget, the MYP, enrollment, attendance, all those things that need to be, crystal clear to our community, but mostly to you folks. STRS and PERS have actually quantified some of those dollars and not just looking at the rate, so that'll be a little bit of new information. So the budget in context. Do we have a budget crisis? No. Do we have a budget problem? Yes. We are using our best budgeting skills and practices to figure out what our systemic imbalance is, and then to set about righting that. Basically, bottom line, our costs are outpacing our available revenues. And as you know, when we get more students, we don't necessarily get more money related to those students. And then there's certain cost drivers that are out of our control. We've talked about those before, as far as services for special education students, retirement costs, health benefits, and other mandates. So how do we deal with this imbalance? 4 ways, right? Responsible money management practices. We're not being wasteful. Planned process of reductions in spending, and we are in that process now. That was, the board has been watching this for a few years and deliberately made some reductions for this coming budget year, and there will be more to be made. Methodically and intentionally using reserves to cushion the further cuts. That's why we have them, but we need to get them back to a safer level that's more in line with the board's goals. And then relying on our community, of course, to continue its commitment to maintaining our quality schools. And all of this then helps avoid erosion in the quality of our education, but we're going to need more money to balance, to avoid even deeper cuts. The state budget process, that cycle starts in January. January, actually, things looked pretty good, and the governor's proposal was nice, right? It was fully funding the LCFF. It doesn't help us, but it's an indicator of what's going on with the economy and the priority of schools. There was some one-time money, a chunk of one-time money talked about in January. February, March, state revenues didn't look that great. April, they started looking a lot better. And so by May, the May revise came out even healthier than the January proposal as far as schools go. The one-time money projection was increased. There was an additional pot of money put on top of LCFF calculation. Again, we didn't get that, but and now, last week, this week, we're having all those conference committee meetings and fine-tuning what the state budget will look like. As soon as it's enacted, we'll bring any material changes back to the board. So let's talk a little bit about our community funding, and in several ways, right? So we have property taxes. We're looking at an increase of about $3.1 million for our property taxes next year from the current year level, or about 5.2%. The district expects to receive parcel taxes of 10.3%, which is $300,000 more than the 17-18 year because of the cost of living allowance that's built into the formula. And of course, the board has called for a parcel tax increase ballot measure for November. And then the foundations also provide great financial support to the district. And we don't automatically put all of that the revenue that we expect or hope for in the budget, so you'll see a drop in local revenue for the adopted budget. But as we get written commitments from any grantors and donors, or the funds are received, then we include those funds and the related expenditures into the budget. So again, property taxes are increasing, but at a slower rate. We are projecting a little bit higher next year than the current year, which was significantly lower than the prior 3 years. And I've talked about that before. Does this do the little thingy? Yeah. So as we all met with the county auditor, controller, and assessor a couple of months ago, and the closest I could get to a prognosis was we're looking at about a 4.5% to 5% increase on the natural countywide. Well, boy, oh boy, there it is, right? And so these 3 years, though, these are going to be the payback, the increased assessments for those properties that took lower assessments under AB 8 or Prop 8, during the downtimes. And then what happens is the state then can come along, and when their assessments catch up, they don't just have a 2% increase. They're allowed to get caught up all the way to where they would have been had they not been lowered. Okay, so these are some artificially high years, and here is kind of what we're looking at as a fairly stable rate of property tax growth for the district. Parcel tax growth, just that consistent 3% increase, 3-ish. It does change year to year. It's not, you think, well, we have number of parcels doesn't change, but the number of exemptions does. So, and those have to be applied for every year. We may have more, we may have less. I was listening to the admin in the business office today go around and around and around with someone on about the 6th phone call, and just somebody's finding every way that he can to get that exemption. It was kind of interesting to listen to. But we work really hard to keep those rolls as tight as we can. When they're late, or if we're delayed in getting the paperwork into the state or into the county, they do issue refunds when they come in later and say, actually, I should have been exempt. It's just a cash flow for the individual. And then what would it look like if the current $149 per parcel increase were to be added through the November election process? It would add about $5 million a year to our $10 million. And you can see that changes the shape of that curve significantly. So key revenue assumptions for next year's budget. We're looking at enrollment of 5167, reaching that 5,000 mark solidly. Estimated ADA of 4872, which is actually an ADA to enrollment ratio of about 94.3%, which is the average of the last few years. A unified district should be higher, an elementary district should be higher, yet high school is just harder to get them to show up every day, right? They've got cars. And so 94.3 is not bad for a high school district. And of course, we're not, we want as high of ADA as possible because that means there's more learning going on. An LCFF-funded district is going to want higher ADA for funding purposes. But, considering we aren't motivated to scrape up every ADA for funding, that's a nice level of students on average at school every day. And of course, since we receive the majority of our revenues from property taxes, we aren't super concerned about our enrollment or our attendance from a revenue standpoint, but obviously very concerned on an expenditure, from an expenditure perspective. So here's just the historical chart, and and look at that very top right corner, right? That's a little bit of a flattening maybe. So that's a slowdown in the rate of growth is what's being projected, that this coming year is kind of the last triple-digit level of increase, according to the demographics that we have. And that's how we've done our projections going forward as far as staffing and costs. So while the rate of property tax revenues, the rate of growth slows, enrollment continues to grow. And so that's going to put a squeeze on the funding per student as students grow faster than the related revenues and the costs. Sorry. Steal a slide from somebody and it's got a little animated thing going on. So lottery is estimated to be at 144 per ADA, 48 for restricted. So the restricted lottery, that's the Prop 20, highly restrictive actually for instructional materials only, and there are definitions of what counts as instructional materials under Prop 20. Typically people just save it up and use it for textbooks because that for sure qualifies, and that's what we do. Mandated cost block grant, about $58 per student for secondary schools, for high school students. So in the current year budget, we have one-time mandated cost revenues of $147 per ADA, which have been backed out in the budget year. And we did not include anything for 18-19 on one-time money. I didn't do it at second interim. I didn't do it at adopted budget, just because it's still being talked about. We've had those conversations actually at the county office, and there was talk that it could be chopped up and given to other programs. It was chopped up. The proposal at May Revise was $344 a student. That was cut in half, but the other half at least stayed in the Education Prop 98 pot, because we were thinking, well, it could go to health and services, right? It could go to prisons, but it stayed in education, but likely nothing that we would be eligible for. Some transparency stuff, some CTE. It did not go into special ed. We thought at least if it went into special ed, we'd get a chunk of that probably passed through. But it looks like it'll be, but the next bullet says, that it'll probably be about $168 per student. That would be around $800 that we'll get to add to the numbers that you see in front of you. So that's good news. That's like my biggest chunk of good news.
$800,000.
Yes, it's good. One time, but that goes straight to fund balance, right? That'll change a percent, the percentage calculation of reserves for the budget year. So that is, it helps just fund balance as we go through. The EPA account, that's the Prop 30. That was the magic money that that everybody passed that was going to have all this money flooding to schools. It is actually one of the benefits for basic aid districts is we do get $200 per student for EPA. If you're a LCFF funded district, it's just part of your LCFF funding. They just cut part of it off, put it in a different account, and you have double accounting to do for it with no additional revenue. We'll do the double accounting because this is actually additional revenue for us. And it was extended. The money was supposed to have sunset already, but it has been extended into the 2020s. And so we will spend that on teachers and their benefits all day long. So combined general fund revenues, property taxes are obviously our biggest chunk of revenues. The federal money, we have a little sliver of federal money, a couple of title programs and federal special ed funding, IDEA. State revenue includes lottery, both restricted and unrestricted, and mandated block grant, and then any one-time monies would also go into the state pot. And then local is a much larger share of the pie than in many districts, and that includes our parcel tax and our foundation donations.
Terry, I don't know that you can answer this question.
Okay.
Does anybody raise the idea that given what, for example, Marin County pays in federal taxes, that our share coming back in terms of federal monies in education is so abysmally low?
Most of the federal funds are socioeconomic based. So they're going to go to your districts that have a 90% unduplicated population of free and reduced and EL students. That's just the formulas. There's no district in the state where it's their primary funding. It's a bigger sliver, but it might be 5 or 8 or maybe 9% in one of those higher percent districts. But it's probably not even their second biggest share of the pie. So here's that squeeze as far as revenues and revenues per student. So yes, the blue bar shows that revenue continues to increase, but the red line shows that when you divide by an ever-increasing number of students, the revenue per student has gone from about $15,000 per student on the left to a high of about $17,000 and down now more in the $16,000 per student range. And so less per student with ever-increasing revenue. So that is kind of the summary of what our real funding problem is.
Terry, do you know what the state average is for revenue per student?
Less.
No. Is it like 11 or 12, or is it even lower than that?
Well, I mean, we're a high school district, so on average, a high school district will have more because LCFF funds high school districts several $1,000s more per student than they would an elementary district. But we are still, I think last time I looked at the LCFF calculator, we have about $3,000 per student above what we would have if we were funded by the state as an LCFF district. So that's not an average necessarily, but our excess taxes provide us that extra $3,000. So general fund expenditures for next year, we're going to just be talking about the general fund primarily, so none of the cafeteria facilities operations here. Salaries and benefits on the unrestricted side are about 85% of the budget, which is right on, actually, the state average. There was an article that came out this week on school services that for high school districts, it's 85%. It used to be higher because there used to be a lot more categorical programs, and now it's kind of all in LCFF. I mean, it's jimmied the comparison over the last few years. And the other thing I would say too is when we look at the expenditure budget, right, the 85% is our employees. That's our 1,000s, 2,000s, 3,000s, right, the people on our payroll. But of course, as the costs for some of the services for special education students or any position that we can't fill that we have to, right, go out to a contractor, there's a big chunk in of contracted services that are also people. They're somebody else's employees, not our employees, because so really most of our budget is people, ours and other people's, other agencies. So we increased the STRS rate to the 18-19 rate. It went up another 1.85%, which was an additional $733,000 in the 18-19 budget compared to if we hadn't increased it that much. And then PERS, likewise, this is only the employer share. So the employer share, the employer rate for PERS going up cost an additional $200,000 in the 18-19 budget. At the same time, not every year, but this year, the employee share for both of those retirement systems is also going up. And then on the STRS side, there's also a contribution that the state makes on behalf of our certificated employees. And that's that entry that we book at the end of the year where we put in the kind of the fake revenue, fake expense, right? We put onto our books STRS on behalf expenditures, and the state gives us a number and says, we are paying this many millions of dollars on behalf of your STRS employees. So we book a state revenue and reflect the state expenditure so that it'll show up in our financial statements. So there's, three sources of money. I mean, both of these are approaching, 40% level between employer, employee, and state for PERS as far as contributions into the retirement system on a monthly basis.
40% of what?
Payroll of salaries. And then on top of that, we have Social Security and unemployment and all of those other costs. But just for the STRS and PERS.
40%. So if an employee is making $100,000, we're putting an additional $40,000 in towards.
We aren't, but between the employee and the district, and we're not quite at 40% on the PERS side yet. We'll get there quickly in the next few years. But on the STRS side, by the time you look at the 6 to 8% the state puts in, the 10% the employee puts in, and the 16% we put in. And so that's the first chunk that comes off of a payroll dollar. And then, like I said, workers' comp, unemployment, Social Security, Medicare, all of those costs. So the burden, as they call it, or the statutory benefits on top of salaries, and that's all before health and welfare benefits. That's just the percent-driven costs. And it is, and I think I've mentioned before, boards and superintendents, I mean, the first reaction a few years ago was, well, what's the state going to do about this? Well, it's not the state's issue. It's not the state's employees. The state has their own PERS problem. They have more PERS employees than any other agency in the state, and they need to pay their PERS employees share. These are our employees. These are their benefits. These are the contracts that they've entered into and that we've entered into with them, and it's our responsibility. And so it's our job to find a way to pay for these benefits. EPA funds are included at that almost $1 million amount that I had talked about on the revenue slide. And then, of course, the expenditures for the LCAP are also included in the budget. So here's the summary of the 18-19 budget. Very summarized, but just splitting it between unrestricted and restricted, and showing that the deficit on the unrestricted side is $7.9 million, leaving us with an unrestricted fund balance of $8.5 million. And basically on the restricted side, we've budgeted to spend all of the restricted revenues, and so that's why that zeroes out. It never happens that way. Those numbers will change, of course, when we close the books. The beginning fund balance will. If you can't spend more than that amount, you'll spend something less. But at this point, we're bringing forward what we estimate the beginning fund balances, the ending fund balances for the current year to be as beginning fund balances for next year.
So, Terry, why is this slide labeled adopted budget summary? Is this the budget from last year? Was this the first year out budget?
No, this is the 2018. This is what will be brought back in 2 weeks as the 18-19 adopted budget.
Okay, so it's not adopted yet?
No.
Proposed.
Proposed to be adopted.
Right, okay. So I have a copy of the projection from the second interim.
I have a slide on that, and I talk about all the differences.
You're going to talk about why we are at $7.9
Yes.
million instead of 5.2?
Yes.
Okay.
I am.
Can't wait.
I know you are interested in that, and I was too. I needed to be able to know and to be able to explain it. So yeah, I have done that analysis, and we'll share it in a few slides. So again, here's just the graphical representation of the entire budget on the expenditure side, and there's the 85% of salaries and benefits, and again, that large blue services and operations, which includes a lot of contracted out people services for, whether it's non-public agencies, non-public services, speech therapists, psychologists. It's just very difficult to get some of those highly specialized positions, and there are contractors and agencies out there that can fill that until we can fill our own positions. Wait, where am I? 19. Oh, gosh. Skipped the whole meat of the thing. Sorry. Okay, so again, I apologize. One of my two slides that has a lot of numbers, but I will just highlight what I want to talk about, and that all of these has backup throughout the budget and the presentation. But, so let's look at the 18-19 budget, which we just looked at in summary. Here's the $7.9 million of deficit spending, the estimated fund balance that we're going to bring forward for them this year, the $8.5 million of unrestricted fund balance, and then the set-asides that we need to make out of that. The assigned, we need to assign for the salary settlement that is not included in the budget because of timing. It couldn't be approved tonight and be also included in the budget. And so we've set aside enough money in the fund balance each year until we can get the salary settlements spread up in the salary lines. So we just set it.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I do understand that it's not reflected in here, but where is it set aside?
It's right here where it says assigned. A big chunk of those, the 3.5, the 1.4, and the 1.4, are salary dollars that will eventually be above the line, if you will.
So that's a designated reserve, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we don't have that terminology more, but that's what it is. Yes.
And it's a designated reserve in anticipation of settlements that we reach with our unions?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I needed to set it aside so it doesn't look like it's available to be spent. And so by the time you see budget numbers next time, we will have made the budget revisions and actually put it into the budget for 18-19 where it will flow through in the multi-year projection.
And why is it 3.5 in 18-19 and 1.5 in the other years, the out years?
Because also in the 3.5 is a set aside to cover the following year's deficit spending, to make sure we save enough fund balance to cover the following year's deficit. So it's, and there is a slide here that will break down what all of that 3.5 is.
Okay.
So I would draw your attention to the three primary lines, right? The unidentified cuts that it takes to get to these numbers at the bottom that we'll get to. The green, the net increase or decrease, 7.9 deficit spending, 2.6 after $6 million reduction, and break even budget after an additional $4 million on top of the $6 million.
You're going to talk about how you got to 6 and 10, or is now the time to talk about that?
We can talk about it now. Basically, I got to 6 and 10 so that we had 5% on the bottom line. And that we had a break-even budget in 2021 because that was the direction that the board had headed at second interim. So that's just an iterative process.
Right. But it looks to me like our deficit spending for next year is really $6 million plus 2.7.
Yes, it is. Without cuts, it would be. But we can't sustain that. We would have we wouldn't even have our 3%. We wouldn't have a fund balance if we didn't cut the 6 million, right? Because we've only are projected after the 6 million of cuts to have 5.8.
Okay, so what's the actual, do you know what the actual number is in 2000, right? You have nothing there for 2018-19 because we're just adopting the budget.
Right, everything's
But if
spread
we were-
amongst the dollars.
But if we were looking back, right, last year, we had numbers last year for our projection for 2018-19. So what's the number of decreases that we achieved? In other words, it's $6 million for next year. That's what we're saying we're going to do.
Right.
Good luck with that. But what did we get? What would have been the number that we got this year? We spent a lot of time cutting. What did we cut? What did we achieve?
Can we wait till I get to that comparative slide between the projection at second interim and what we're looking at, where we can talk about each of the changes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then, as I said, we all know that the 3% state minimum is ridiculously low. 5% for a basic aid district is very low. I mean, look where we were just only a few years ago, right? So these are serious numbers, right? We do have a budget problem, not a crisis, because we're going to come up with a solution. But these are not numbers that any of you are comfortable looking at. I do understand that.
Can I ask you a real quick question?
Yes.
And I'm having trouble with my glasses. So when we look at I can't remember what you referred to it as, it's a term we don't use anymore, but the assigned.
Oh, assigned or
It's like we-
designated.
Yeah, thank you. So does this mean that we actually have about 5 million unassigned after all these, after things have moved back up into the labor column?
Yes,
Okay.
right. So we fall short of our I put 17% in this line, which if we could afford it is what would be available there with even more left perhaps. But we're short of that 17% by the 10 million. That's how to read that.
Okay, Leslie, I didn't understand your question then, because it didn't
Well,
make sense to me.
I was not, it's not exact math, but I was just noticing, what struck me
So
was
the
when you
sum of
look
these two.
at the ending balance of 8.5 million, it's round, and then you look at the total fund balance, same value, but some of that's assigned already. So I was just looking at what really will be left for
We're left with
us.
the 15.2 minus the 10 million.
So that's about 5. yeah.
Yes.
So the 10 is just we're not.
arbitrary.
Yeah, well, that's the state, that's our 17%
Yeah.
EU, and so that's the 10, just to kind of remind
It
us,
just-
this is
it
how
keep-
much under we are.
Right. It keeps the 17% on
It
there,
just
otherwise
keeps us-
you'd never
just
see
keeps
it.
us reminding that you're 10
The
10
goal.
million below where you want to be.
Yes.
And so so then I thought, gee, what are we left with? So that's why I
I
asked.
see.
Yeah.
What the SACS forms will show, the state forms, because they don't take negative, wish list fund balances, will be that 5 million that's left. And they'll say, there's an automatic calculation that will say you're at 5.6%, you meet your 3% check. And we're going to go, no, not so check, not happy. Okay, but, so yeah, this is just more of an example or just a demonstration of what it would look like, what the 17 would look like, and kind of where we want to eventually be. So in the MYP, we've been talking about just the 18-19 budget, but as far as MYP and going forward, we have property taxes estimated to increase 4.4%, 4.25. Those are less than what we're looking at in the current year until we really, have a couple of lines to draw and know. I mean, that might be conservative, it might not be conservative. And as we get further into the year and start seeing the changes after they lock the roll, we'll have a better idea then of what to do for 1 year out. But it's a stab, and you don't want to go too high on that and have a surprise once tax bills go out in a year. So federal funds are expected to slightly decline just as the feds continue to tighten up and make more difficult the allocation of federal dollars. Unrestricted revenues are increased by 3% adjustment to the parcel tax, but they'll look lower because, as I mentioned, we don't have all of the foundation and donation monies in there because it hasn't happened yet. On the MYP side, on the expenditures, the estimated step movement for teachers or for certificated is 1.83%, and we've added 4.8 FTE for growth in each of the next 2 years based on the demographers' enrollment projections. The estimate for step movement for classified employees is 2.2%. Health benefits, they are projected to go up 8% in each of the next 2 years, and that was just based on a rolling 3-year average. They only went up 1% going into 18-19, which was great. But for the 17-18 year, they had gone up 10. And the year before was something more in the mid-range. So, wow, I don't know. There's obviously a lot of changes at the federal and insurance company level on insurances. So I just did a 3-year average to come up with the projected increase. If you guys have an insight or a better knowledge on that, I will absolutely be willing to use that. Contributions from unrestricted general fund revenues to the special ed program to cover shortfalls in special education funding continues to increase annually. And in addition, the contributions to the routine restricted maintenance account must be reinstated back to the pre-recession level of 3% by the end of 2019-20. And so we're almost there. We were at about 2.7 because of the cost increases in that program and salary increases for the folks paid out of that funding. We went part of the way to the 3%, but for 19-20 we will have to increase that. Which may not increase the dollars if our expenditures go down, right? So, we're close. We're not too far dollar-wise off. Contributions from unrestricted general fund overall, you can see that middle column for the 18-19 budget went up 18%. I'm projecting, I'm afraid that's a little low going forward. We've projected increases basically based on, step increases, known cost increases of the program, and some estimated, you can just see a little bit of, a little bit of an increase, well, 900,000 on special ed for state, looking at, the shortfall there. So each of these is a little bit more than the prior year, but only at the 7% level. We don't know more than that as we get, by first interim, certainly by second interim, we should have a better idea of what's going on with the current year special ed costs, which will help inform us as to whether our 1920 projection is too low of an increase. Yes.
Terry, have we heard any talk about transportation costs? It seems to me that's been up for discussion in legislation, special ed transportation.
It went up a ton. I mean, from, last year 730,000, next year 913. We don't have that many students that we're transporting, because that's only special ed transportation costs. And that's just the billings from our transportation JPA.
And we're not getting any the state's not looking at that.
Not anymore. If we were LCFF, there's an add-on for what you used to get. So that's part of our LCFF calculation that we received 3 million or 3,000 a kid more than.
Terry, what is RRMA?
Routine restricted maintenance account, right?
Oh.
The next to the, that next to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right there.
So, tell me what the rationale is for projecting a 7% increase in the 2 out years when we've been increasing at an average of what looks like 20% in the last 2 years.
Right. So what we did is we just projected what would happen with, some small bumps to federal special ed dollars consistent with prior years. I mean, it's a lot of averaging. But looking at what do we expect, or a little bit of decrease actually, what do we expect the revenue side to do? We inflated the expenditure side by employee cost increases, and the net difference, whatever it takes to balance that program then. So we don't say it's going to be 7% and back into it. It's what does the contribution that we're estimating, what does the shortfall in each of these separate categories look like it would be just with what we know, and that added up to 16,874,000, which happens to be a 7% change. If the revenue goes down even more, or the costs go up even more, that will go up. If we age out some students, where we have seniors that leave the system in greater numbers than freshmen that enter the system, it could go down 1 year. So it's very student specific. And so I think that's one of the reasons that for the 18-19 budget, and you're going to see it when I compare to what we looked at second interim versus what we looked at, what we are looking at adopting in the budget, is that the special ed department actually went through and looked student by student as far as like the non-public schools and the non-public agencies, and they took off maybe the 2 students they knew that were leaving. They work with all of the feeder districts and try and figure out who's coming in and who can we serve versus who might we not be able to serve. This is a really tough time of year to get really accurate on special education when we have not done IEPs on any of the incoming students yet. So I am concerned because I look at that 7% and I think, wow, that doesn't look reasonable. But based on what we know today, that's kind of the sum of what, no, I don't think it'll be less than that. But it could easily be more.
I just don't understand what you just said. I'm sorry. But if I just look at these trends, we spent a lot of time a couple of years ago in particular focusing on special ed, and we had a specialist come in and do an analysis and so forth, which led to our creating that special day class at Temescal. But you just look at these numbers, right? You look at I just don't see how we can arrive at 7%. It's not like our enrollment's going down. So, right, I just don't understand it, right? What were we looking at before? And you said you took a look at the past 3 years, and you averaged in terms of, what was it, property tax? increases,
Right, right.
You looked at the average, right? And so I don't understand how we can, I just don't understand how we can say 7%. We're just going to have another nasty surprise.
Well, I mean, for instance, oops, sorry, wrong button. One of the items that's in this $10 million number in the 18-19 budget that's, significantly more than the current year is 3 additional special education teachers. We aren't projecting to add special ed teachers in either of those 2 years. So you wouldn't expect to see the same level of increase just for that one item, right? I mean, there's $500,000 of this increase that you wouldn't expect in those 2 years. Like I said, we don't say, well, maybe it should be 15% and figure out where it's going to go. We just kind of put the numbers together, make assumptions on revenues and expenditures. But considering the 18-19 may or may not be solid, it's really hard to be 100% on those out years. I mean, we can put in a placeholder and just say, and then we think it'll be more. I wouldn't know where to put it. Or to be able to defend exactly where it might happen. But, I mean, I'm with you. I know exactly what you're saying, and I have that same reaction. But when we just kind of roll the numbers together and look at the result, this is what we got. If we, we can look, between now and first interim and do some work with special education and just have them scrub it a lot more. And right now, the only real specific information that we got from special ed was for the 18-19 budget, because we don't ask all of our departments to do multi-year projecting and to look beyond their budget for next year. We could do that. And I'm not going to be the best person in this district to know what, the age of the students, the services of the students, who's coming, who's going, but we could certainly, put some heads together on that. Because, like I said, I totally understand what you're saying, but don't know more special ed details to arbitrarily make it a different number.
But the increase looks like it does coincide with our enrollment growth and when it starts to level off. I mean, and that's what I'm wondering. And when I look at it, it's really the 7% increase versus 18% increase. It might have some sense to it, but I thought tell me if I heard you correctly, that when they were developing the 18-19 budget, they developed that by actually working with the feeder districts to identify the number of IEPs.
Yes,
So
and they
they
really
actually-
zero-based the expenditure side of next year.
Yeah, so that one, and then there's just an assumption made on the following set of students? Did they get that data from the feeder schools?
They didn't make an assumption on the next set of students. I just take
So
the
you
budget.
took the budget.
I'm the only
and-
one that does an MYP.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're assuming that things don't change much actually from year to year, and that's why
Right.
the increase is only 7%. You're saying,
Right.
well,
I have no knowledge that it would
It's
change.
not going to change. It's
Right.
going to be, it's going to hold it back. So we're not saying there's a drop in expenditure. It's just that it's not going to grow. It's actually going to still be an increase in expenditure, just not as big of a rate that we've seen
Right.
the last.
I mean, that's still $1.1 million
Yeah.
of an increase
Yeah.
for 10% of our population. I mean,
I
I-
see now. I see now. Thanks.
I'm wondering, Terry, if you can define excess costs as we look at that chart. Excess costs are the ones that seem to be growing at a higher rate.
those are that's the excess cost of the county office and SELPA. They educate a number of our students that we don't. And so the county offices all are like a zero-sum game. They get so much for revenue, and it depends on how many students we send into the system, and then there's a, multi-page, 20, I don't know, multi-page formula that says, okay, based on each of these districts' use of all of the county office services, here's how much was not funded, and everybody pays their share to the county office of ed. The excess cost line goes back to MCOE. The transportation line goes to MPTA.
If I may.
Yes.
The increase that we're seeing for 18-19, which in your budget went from 767 to almost $1.2 million, that's a fair increase. And indeed, there was a large increase projected for excess costs for 18-19, and that's because we are opening more classrooms. We're opening a classroom at Marindale, opening one at Ross Valley. We're also embedding occupational therapists in the early education programs in an attempt to reduce our reliance upon non-public agencies. So the hope is that while it appears to be a large increase, we're asking all of the districts to measure the full cost in your home base, so that at the end of the year, we can come back and say, okay, this seemed like this was a really good program expansion that's going to serve children really well, and at the end of the day, be more cost efficient, but the proof is in the pudding. So let's gather the data so that we can come back at the end of the year and really see whether this program change saves districts funding or costs them funding. So one of the reasons it looks an even larger increase is because we have no idea what number of pupils we'll have next year. So we assume the number of pupils will stay the same. So on a per pupil basis, it appears to be a very large increase. Does that help explain?
Yeah, so
that program?
I think what I'm hearing is that we are assessed this dollar amount,
Pro rata, yeah.
pro rata, by MCOE, and we help, this is not necessarily TAM Union students, we're helping to cover,
We're assessed based on our number of students.
we are, okay,
Is for exactly these students from TAM, so each district pays for their own students that are being served. Of course, the other reason you're seeing the increase is because you have a huge increase in population.
right, okay. That makes me feel better, and thank you for that clarification.
Right.
It is a big jump in excess costs, so.
And then I guess, let me finish it. I think this is true, then that same level of expansion of program is not anticipated in the 2 out years. And, right, so hopefully the 18 is the outlier, not the 7. And it'll probably be something in between.
So, I mean, just to be really, right, I mean, we were contributing, even excluding transportation, right, we were contributing about $8 million from general fund revenue towards special ed.
In 16, 17.
16, 17.
Right.
And in 18, 19, we're at $13 million. We've gone from 8 to $13 million.
Well, excluding it, oh, you said just transportation, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus another million, almost another million. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
12,
just
yeah.
astounding. It's just astounding. And do you have a sense as to how representative that is for, compared to other districts?
Very. And not just in Marin County. Obviously, everybody shared in a lot of that to the same extent, but I would say every district I've been in, special ed costs, unfunded costs, because the revenues aren't really increasing, special ed unfunded costs are increasing at greater than the rate of enrollment growth, and special ed costs are increasing in declining enrollment districts. It is not proportional anywhere I've seen.
Yeah, I know out in Lagunitas, they have declining enrollment and rapidly increasing special ed costs.
So what's the reason for that?
Well, one of the things is the difficulty in finding special education teachers, so we pay them more. The difficulty in filling psychologists and speech therapists, and so we pay outside agencies at a higher hourly rate than than we would pay our own employees. And that is also everywhere.
There's also an uptick in the severity of disability.
I can't hear. What?
She said there's an uptick in the severity of disabilities as well, which again is another thing beyond our control. I mean, as we looked at, like LCFF revenues have been increasing with all of these gap funding and that kind of thing, and, has gone up maybe 15% over the last 4 or 5 years. Special education funding on a per student basis goes up by the COLA every year. So it's going up 1 or 2%. At the state, as far as the state monies, and some of the federal funds are declining. So we have more students, we have more severe students, we have costlier programs with the same basic funding year after year. And there are a lot of legislative groups and think tank folks in Sacramento just beating this drum every day, and they have been for years, that this is this isn't an optional program. These are our students. They need these services. We need the funding to pay for these additional services that they deserve. And it's and that's why I said when we started thinking that one-time funding that the governor proposed, that part of that was going to be split off, I was like, okay, some of it's going to go to LCFF, great for those districts, but we really thought some of what got split off would also go to special education and trickle down through special education funding. And the last thing I saw said 0 went to increase special education funding. And there just aren't other sources of that. I mean, there's only the state and the feds to pay for that. And us. Okay. So in addition to, the prior slide talked about contributions within the general fund, where we take unrestricted revenue dollars and balance out or support those underfunded restricted programs. In addition to that, we do transfer funds out of the general fund into other funds to keep them in balance, or as a deliberate funding mechanism if we're going to, feed deferred maintenance or a special projects fund. But those numbers went up. But I do also, on this slide, I would have a verbal edit, and not that the change will be made in the next 2 weeks, but it will be before you see the budget after that, which is, you need to put that red dot where I keep pushing. On the adult ed line, we needed to post a $200,000 contribution because the way that adult education is budgeted in the current year budget, it's a long kind of complicated explanation, but it basically, the budget in the current year does not leave any fund balance to roll forward. And they're going to be deficit spending in the next year, and we can't have a negative fund. We couldn't have that whole Fund 11 be negative, so I had to plug the gap. But talking to the adult education folks today, they're actually going to have a couple $100,000 left that they aren't planning on spending of what was included in their budget. And so when we close the books, there will be fund balance that will roll into next year, and we'll be able to pull that $200,000 back. Okay, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's some good news, but we just couldn't effectuate it now and have the state software balance.
Keep highlighting those good news nuggets.
That's the second one, right?
I think it's...
There's the 800,000 and the 200,000. And the 200,000 is ongoing. So how does 200,000 become 600,000? It happens every year. So that's good too. The community ed, that's a big contribution. I think that there's been discussion about we need to look at that program, look at that operation. How do we keep that balanced? I support that effort. Cafeteria program has had increasing contributions, significant increasing contributions over the last few years. And actually a couple of years ago, we contributed $400,000, but we also charged, some tens of thousands of dollars of indirects to cafeteria before we had to make that $400,000 contribution. This $500,000 is without gaining any indirect cost reimbursement from that fund. So it's really, $150,000, $200,000 swing in the amount of contribution. So we're going to talk about that. What can we do? Do we need some additional eyes? Do we, how do we keep that? And just look at it. Is it, number of staff? Is it the food that's being, who knows, right? I mean, there are experts that know better than I. But again, that's the amount of money it took to balance that fund, given the expenditures that are estimated to be spent next year. Oh, and then the other thing too, so you see the $300,000 that we're transferring from our Fund 40 Capital Projects Fund into the developer fee fund. As you know, we only began just charging developer fees a couple of years ago, but we have a lot of growth-related costs. And so what I am recommending that we do is, as we're buying portables, as we're placing portables and doing all of that growth-related cost, let's track that in the developer fee fund, and eventually we'll collect enough developer fees to cover those costs. And in the meantime, we're just kind of feeding it from the capital projects fund rather than charging it to capital projects, because we want to be able to show the developers 5-6 years from now that we did spend their money on growth items. Okay, because it's very restricted to growth. If we do all of our growth spending, our $3 million of growth spending, and charge it all to the the capital projects fund, and then over the next 5 years get $3 million, it's just going to sit in the developer fee fund, and there's a risk actually that you have to pay it back if you can't show you spend it in 5 years. So once we start getting the developer fees, we can pay back the Fund 40. So I'm just kind of doing it for budgetary and cash purposes to get the costs where I think they should be in the long run. Does that make sense?
Developer fees, so the balance in there, what have we collected with developer fees?
We've actually collected, I I think, almost $200,000 this year, which is a lot better than the zero we were collecting in the years past.
Okay. That's another nugget. I like that.
Okay, I gotta remember that one. Okay, highlight that one too. Okay, so this is one of the two schedules, Michael, that you had asked about. So we are required now, there's actually a provision in the education code that says in the adopted budget and at the public hearing, we need to talk about all of the reserves that we have, all of our huge amount of reserves that we have above 3%, which of course, we don't right now. And you can see our reserve level next to the bottom line is there's those 5-ish% reserve levels. The Government Finance Officers Association, as you know, recommends about 2 months of payroll, about 17%, 17% of the budget should be in reserves, and that's why you have that policy. So if you look in the 18-19 first column, and there's some gaps here where the formula doesn't go over, but it doesn't affect anything because I pulled all the numbers from the first column, but I will correct that before the budget's adopted so it looks accurate, is accurate. But here's that $3.5 million in the first column for total assigned. So there's $2.69 million covering the 19-20 projected deficit, the salary settlement for TFT, and then a similar settlement for the other groups, and that makes up the 3.5. The next year, it's the two salary settlements, which remember, eventually those will be up right above the line in the salary lines, but for now we're setting the money aside. And then as we had outlined at second interim, we had identified some priorities, instructional technology, staff development, textbooks, not in the current year budget, but to be set aside out of future budgets. So those are the assignments that then reduce the amount of available fund balance and leave it at that $5 million. Does that make sense?
Can you go back, sorry?
Yes.
Okay, so these are assigned reserves, so we know, right, so for example, the salary settlement with TFT, we know we include that every year because it's a rolling, right?
We include it every year because I don't have it up in the salary lines as being spent, so I need to set it aside out of fund balance to make sure we don't spend it on anything else. Like I said, over the next 2 months, we will change position control, we'll change all the salary schedules, we'll change the budgets, and put that increase onto each salary line, each of the thousands of salary lines in the budget, salaries and benefits. But until we spread it and upload it and put it into our actual budget, we're setting it aside to keep it safe. So
It's an ongoing cost.
I understand it's an ongoing cost, that's why we see it every year.
Right.
So, I see, so once that has been implemented,
it won't be down in fund balance anymore.
right, it won't be in the assigned, it'll be up in the salary line.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so what we have, okay, but the agreement also looks back to January 1, 2017.
Right, I also have it assigned in the 17-18 estimated actuals.
Oh, good, okay.
Which brings down the beginning fund balance for the current year.
Yes, available, not total.
So, okay, the beginning fund balance, but that's not reflected on here.
Because 17-18 is not on here yet.
Right, so we don't, right, but we could have a number on there. So we don't have a beginning fund balance on this slide.
Not on this slide. Here, the purpose of this one is just to talk about your excess reserves, our massive quantities of reserves above the state minimum.
But you have accounted for it? I mean, you've
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. This will be much less messy and confusing once we get those budget
Yeah.
changes implemented. That's actually a very time-consuming process to impact all those lines. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, so now we have a couple of slides on budget reductions. So at second interim, the board determined that they would make $3 million in budget balancing cost reductions for 18-19. We knew that was step one of a multi-year plan. And the areas that were identified as being reduced were the district leadership program, which included 4 actual positions, but a number of other salary costs of substitutes and hourly costs, but 4 actual positions. The instructional coaches, any non-essential food and travel, reduction in the number of teachers to be hired, and an adjustment of the site allocations that, so given that, about 1.8 million of all of those items is what it ended up being. By the time everybody bounced through positions, and the least senior were impacted, and the least senior positions were filled, were left unfilled. About 1.8 million ended up, and we ended up having to add a few more positions to the budget than was estimated in that reduction. And then in addition, so all of those cuts were implemented and all of those costs were taken out of the budget, while at the same time, we were seeing the increases in special education, which we carried forward into the future, the increased contributions, the increased, and then a drop in our indirect cost reimbursement. We aren't charging the food services program, and we lost a lot of categorical programs that we were not then able to recover indirect costs from, like educator effectiveness, college career readiness, and Prop 39. Those are all gone out of next year's budget, so we aren't going to recover as much indirect cost. So that's what left us with, and I'll show you the numbers on the next slide. This is the slide that you want.
Let's go back a slide.
But this is the one you've been waiting for.
No.
Okay.
This is what I've been trying to figure out, right? So we were repeatedly, you reminded us, and David reminded us during the LCAP process that we were trying to agree upon line items, but the actual reductions were not going to be, we would have to wait and see what the actual value of the reductions were. Okay, so the estimates that were provided to the LCAP committee and this board from those reductions on the prior slide, right, were $2.8 million.
Yes.
Okay, and we ended up at $1.8 million.
Yes.
Okay, and that of course doesn't include, you said this,
Correct.
the offsets were.
Correct.
And so you haven't told us what the cost of those offsets are, right? What are those
Right.
those 3 bullet points? Do you know what that number is?
I do in a couple of different places, but and I guess that those were the big ticket items. Other things, one of the things that happened in the positive direction, remember I mentioned that health benefits, I'd projected a 7% increase, it came in at 1%. So that went the positive direction.
Yeah,
But
I understand.
right.
I guess what is most disappointing to me is all of the effort that we went through for budget cutting, right? And we only came up with $1.8 million, which was $1 million less than what we estimated it to be when we completed that process. And we left a lot of other potential budget cuts on the table, which is why we're looking at this $6 million number next year and another $4 million in 2021. And we went through all this angst, and we accomplished, I think, not nearly as much as we could have accomplished this year in terms of reducing our spending. And it's just really disappointing, and it's going to make next year that much more difficult.
You're right. It is. And the big difference between the 2.8 and the 1.8, frankly, was not being able to reduce as many new FTE positions for growth. And that was, that was the big difference. Other than that, most the other changes that were identified occurred. The leadership, the costs for coaches, and that over budgeting error, that kind of thing. Those all happened, but we didn't leave 9 new positions unfilled. That's what happened.
Well, I'm just going to quote the esteemed Chuck Ford, right? Which is that we're a district, we're a school district. It's all about personnel, right? And we didn't cut any jobs, right? We haven't cut any jobs since we cut the print shop. We haven't affirmatively cut any jobs since then. Okay, and we're just sticking the problem. We're just moving it along till next year, when we're going to have a less experienced board. It's going to find it more difficult to sort of grasp and deal with these issues. It's just really disappointing, given all the effort that went into it.
I mean, I hear your frustration. I think we did, though we didn't cut any existing positions, we did not hire as many people as we were planning on hiring. So, I mean, I see that as a personnel win on the cutting cost side.
Can I ask you a question? And I want to comment also. I'm just having trouble with the third bullet, a drop in indirect reimbursements. How is an indirect cost a reimbursement due to less
Let me show you real
categorical
quick.
programs?
We were on 27, I paid attention, okay.
Yes, the indirects, I'm not clear.
So right here, so what we do, there's again, a very complicated state formula that says you can charge your categorical programs, let's say 4.5%. It might be 6, it's different it's a unique number for every school district, and it changes year to year. And so what we've done in the past, this number in 17-18, and I don't have that printed out here, is like $800,000 or $900,000 that we were going to recover, we were going to charge restricted programs and have a negative expense, right, an abatement, a repayment of unrestricted overhead costs. And so it dropped to 700,000 because we have fewer categorical programs that we can charge that indirect rate. And so we're not recovering, we're still incurring all those same indirect services, superintendent cost, CBO cost, or custodial cost, all of those costs that we roll into a rate are still spread out in all these expenditures, but there aren't as many dollars of categorical programs to charge 4.5% against. So that's why that was something I didn't project that at second interim. Okay, ready for your numbers? Okay. Again, I apologize for all the numbers, but I really didn't have another way of doing this. So the first 3 columns are what we projected for 18-19 at second interim, okay? The second set of 3 numbers are those same categories in the adopted budget, and then here's the variance, okay? And I have all these codes to talk about each of those variances. So I will read what each of those is while you can look at those numbers. So A is property taxes increased throughout the spring, and so we increased our projection for 18-19, right? Because we were going to do 4.5%, I think, or 4 3/4, and now we're at 5.2.
Terry, I just think it's worth mentioning to the board members, if you open I just noticed this, you open up your packet, and what you're saying is on the next slide, so you can look at both at the same time.
Yes.
It's helpful.
I was just going to read the explanations if you wanted to,
It's just
probably
kind of
need to
nice
read them.
sometimes to read
Yeah.
along when
Okay.
we're trying to grasp all this, that's all.
And then B, your local revenue. Okay, so that's the donations, right? The revenues and expenditures of donations are not budgeted until they're received. So we see a big drop, especially on the restricted side. That's going to be, foundations and local grants and that sort of thing. So C is certificated salaries, and that's where you can see reductions did occur, right? Positions that we thought we were going to fill that didn't get filled, leadership positions that went back into the classroom to fill vacancies, and that sort of thing. So we did have a material drop in the certificated salary line, not from a cut, but just from the adjustments that you guys made in April. D is benefits, so that's going to be.
Sorry, Terry?
Yes.
Is the settlement,
Not in there,
it's not in here?
correct. So it'll bump up that $500,000.
So that,
There'll still be a net savings, but it will, the
but it's
cost,
not going to be $2 million, it's going to be
No.
1.5.
yes.
Okay.
So then on the benefits line, D, so that's those statutory STRS, PERS, on all of those costs. On the lesser salaries, we're going to have lesser statutory benefits. Plus, that's the savings from the health benefits coming in with less of an increase than had been projected at second interim. So that's a real positive that was unexpected on D. E is removing the carryover and one-time network infrastructure costs that were just spread throughout a number of those budget lines in the 17-18 budget. F is primarily an increase in the middle column, and that's special ed NPA, NPS costs. G is your other outgo. And I'm trying to think why it actually, that went down. I'm not sure. I know that it went up for excess costs going to the county office, and I need to research what offset that and actually went down. So I was thinking that was going to be a net increase, and it's actually a decrease of $251,000. But that's net of, that's where those increases in the excess cost and buildbacks would be in that line.
Which line are you on?
Footnote G, so the line that says other outgo, 7XXX. So I don't have a complete answer for you tonight on that one. I will get that, because now that's going to bother me. H, the transfer of indirect costs, again, that's having, fewer programs to, the college career educator effectives, fewer programs to charge. Now here's the big things that really offset the cuts that did occur, and that's the transfers out, went up by $400,000, of which, remember, I'm going to pull $200,000 of that back from adult ed. So that delta will only be $200,000 instead of $410,000. But the contributions to restricted went up $1.3 million more than was projected at second interim. And that was just kind of the game changer in that column.
Is that mostly special ed?
Yes. It's entirely special ed. Because I didn't increase the routine restricted maintenance as much as I had intended. And so the costs that go with that $1.3 million are going to be, those footnote F, right? There's your $1 million of NPA and NPS. Other cost increases are sprinkled throughout some of the other. Actually, in the classified salary line, which I don't have a footnote, but right below the certificated salaries, that increase in the middle, the restricted column 163, is we did add some classified aides to special education, so then that also contributed to the need to increase the contribution from unrestricted.
So, why don't you finish, then I want to ask you a question.
That's it.
So in the second interim budget, unrestricted line, just above total expenditures, we had a placeholder of $3 million
Right.
of budget reductions. So is that, okay, so that disappears with the actuals, I suppose.
Right, because it would be spread amongst all of those lines. And basically, if you took that $3 million out, then this is easier. If you take out this $3 million, this is 7.7 deficit, and that's 7.9. And that's why, you're only seeing these changes in the hundreds of thousands. Or if you put it over, if you put it here, if you put it as a delta here, you'll see the real $2.7 million change from second interim, and a lot of it's right there.
I think if I can add, that goes to sort of your wonder around, when I mentioned it was actualized, which you see in that middle column, now where the $3 million goes away and it gets actualized in terms of where the savings occur. But then it gets masked may not be the best word, by all these other moving parts, the biggest of which are down there at the bottom. So it makes it look like the LCAP fiscal advisory may have done nothing. They did. And if they had done nothing, that would have been an even bigger
worse.
number. Mm-hmm. And so, the question of whether they did enough is relative, I think, to, where the board and each person sits in terms of how much should be done. What we took was the items that the board approved and actualized it in the numbers up there. And I had shared, and Terry, in the process, that number wasn't going to be 2.8. It was going to be some number other than that. I believe I even said lower than that. But like we said, we do think it's around 1.8 of actualization for that. And you see some of that in that last column in the variance, but it doesn't add up to 1.8 either. It gets masked by other moving
things
parts.
that are going up and down at the same time.
So I have a slightly different perspective. And that is that I'm also disappointed. It would have been great if we'd actually hit 3 million. But the way I look at it is that the district had been working on this for quite some time, but it really accelerated over just a really relatively short period of time. I think 2 months is a really short period of time when you're trying to incorporate public viewpoints, and in the end, they realized they really wanted to lean on the district recommendations because you'd done most of that work, and this is where we are. But I don't think we're starting from ground zero next week. All that work that you've done and a lot of the items, like you pointed out, Michael, that have been identified, they're still there to be looked at. And now it can continue. And yeah, we have more to deal with this year, but because of the groundwork that the district admin team and LCAP have made, and we're going to be doing it much longer than just the next 2 months, I'm concerned, but I think we have the right team to do it. And it's helpful, even though it's hard to look at a $6 million figure, it's helpful to see it. There's our new target. And I'm optimistic that the district can do it. But it is.
And remember, I mean, all of these, not to only pass along educational information, all of these numbers do not assume an increase in the parcel tax revenue.
The other thing that I think we've talked about is that because this is an ongoing process, there's nothing to say that this budget, we could come in under budget. I mean, we could, our actuals in 18-19 could come in lower than what we have here. I mean,
Sure.
You've given us, it seems to me, a conservative budget, which is much more preferable than...
Well, I've tried to make it, my word of the last year or two is not to be conservative or aggressive, but to try and be reasonable. I mean, we went through this so many times. We sent the budgets back out to the departments to review and to say, did you really mean this? And I mean, I think it's as tight as we could make it. We didn't add any, I mean, I've had years, and especially in growing districts, where you stick a couple of extra teachers in the budget and you tell the superintendent not to tell anybody, and no, none of that. So it's not conservative that way.
Okay.
These are trying to get the numbers as close, because we can't afford to have extra in there, right? Because we're making such huge decisions based on it. So they will change. I don't know if they'll change up or down, but based on the numbers and the assumptions and the data we have today, we tried to make it as close as we could to what was needed to operate next year.
Okay, so in your judgment, what's the county office going to say when they review our budget?
They're going to have a really long paragraph about deficit spending and how that needs to stop, that they will recognize that we've made progress. They will say start now to identify at least 6 million. I mean, because really you need to identify 8 or 9 to get 6. Didn't we just learn that? Mm-hmm. And that's typical. You never get 100% of what you've identified because there's some reason you need to do something. It is an approvable budget with those reductions, and if they weren't such large and significant reductions, and I think those are two different things, actually. They would probably say, okay, at first interim, you're going to tell us, again, fine-tune how much you're going to have to cut, and at second interim, give us a plan. And I think they're going to want some pretty good details by first interim, because without the 6 million, this is not an approvable budget. So they need to see commitment and meetings and data and serious discussion about that. How'd I do?
You did great. And the only thing I would add to that is that in order for you to cut $6 million, you will be reducing personnel.
Yeah.
In order for you to reduce personnel, you need to make the decision by March 15th. You're not going to submit your second interim budget to us until March 15th. So we would expect you to have a decent enough plan at first interim that you can implement it in time for second interim. You know how far you have to back up.
First
in order to issue those resolutions on March 15th. I mean, last year we were working on that, and
Yes.
Yeah, I think we need to go to the microphone. We can't.
From Lorraine County Office of Attorney's right-hand person. Kate Bailey, I think, or something.
I'm so sorry. Is that better? You're a little shorter than I am, Terry.
And first interim is October?
First interim is actually due to the county office on or before December 15th.
Oh.
So it will be for actual expenditures through October 31st, so you're correct that it does a peg on the October period, but we would anticipate that the board will be reviewing that budget at your December board meeting, and then it will come to the county office on or before December 15th, and we will respond back to you on or before January 15th. I would anticipate with this budget, so $6 million in cuts, you can't make that level of cuts without cutting personnel. In order for you to cut personnel in 1920, you will have to issue your resolutions and your commitment on or before March 15th for your certificated personnel, which means that if you don't have a good idea in December of what that looks like, you will not be able to have the resolution and make those decisions. I mean, Lars, I was going to ask you, how far do you need to back up in order, because it's all based upon seniority and so on and so forth. It's a large process.
It is a large process, as the board knows. We typically would begin discussions with TFT first semester, and we'd be coming to the board late January, early February with recommendations for any certificated layoffs that we may choose to employ. With regard to classified personnel, as you know, there is no March 15th deadline. That can be done at any time in a given year due to lack of work or lack of funds. So they can come earlier, they can come later if the board would choose to lay off classified personnel. I don't disagree with anything that Kate or Terry has said. We all need to realize that we're talking about human beings with families and so forth, and we need to always consider the people behind those positions as we move forward. But I don't disagree with the numbers, nor do I disagree with the premise that if we're going to address the significant deficit, we have to have less people in our employ. I just don't see any other way around that.
So if the good people of Marin County are generous enough to approve an increase in our parcel tax, so that election would be in November, so when would that get incorporated into our budget?
Well, as far as the portion of that we may someday get that relates to 1819, I think we're still a little bit fuzzy on that, but we would be able to reflect a full year's worth of that revenue in 1920 and would do that in the first interim report.
For 1920?
Yes.
Right. And do you have an estimate? I forget, we may have talked about this before, as to what we could recognize for 1819?
I haven't been having the talk with the lawyers as far as there may be some 7 months of current year that we get 6 months later, but I'm not sure.
I can share, I did talk to the bond attorney, and he said, well, it's highly unusual to prorate it the way our language shows, that in the fact that the county office is amenable to going through the billing process, he sees no legal hurdle for doing that. But he explained that because it is somewhat complicated and takes extra time with billing notices, et cetera, he said that's why typically you'll wait until the following July, just because because of the ease. But he saw no legal issue with it, and he just confirmed what we heard from the county and from our own bond lawyer.
And it wouldn't be the county office of education; it would actually be the county
I meant to,
assessor.
yeah, sorry, I said said the wrong thing. But there was a third attorney that Dr. Yoshihar and I
Okay,
talked
good.
to. Yeah.
Okay, so, but I'm just thinking about in terms of timing, right? Because both of you mentioned the March, date by which notices need to go out to certificated employees.
We would know before we got too far into that process. And so maybe what we do, because we certainly can't wait until November to have these discussions. And maybe we do, plan A, plan B, without. And on Wednesday morning, we rip up the one and focus on the other. hopefully.
That's an interesting idea.
Because we've got to have that 6 million in our head by November
Need to be ready.
to get it into the interim report. Okay, a couple more slides. Actually, only a couple. Okay, I've read through those. So just a quick look at all the other funds of the district. You have a chunk of money in the deferred maintenance fund, which is good. And you have some money in your Fund 40, your special reserve for capital outlay. So you have a little bit of facilities money. That's not a lot. It's not a lot for all of our growth. We have no more bond funds left. That would be in that building fund. But in any event, here's just a peek at all of the budgeted other funds of the district. Most of this is not new information to you. I will fly through this and just point out the changes I made, which are actually nothing much to that page. But I did go back and look. If you go from 2013-14 through the 18-19 budget, the increased total of STRS and PERS costs in our annual budget is $4 million. So the 18-19 budget has $4 million more in that benefits line for STRS and PERS than it did in 13-14. And we've had some salary, but that's just the change due to the change of the rates.
Sorry?
Yes.
Can we go back?
Uh-huh.
So we've hired a lot of teachers, since 2013, 2014. You're telling me that this has been, that these numbers, to those additional hires contribute to that $4 million number, or did you?
No, because this red line, you can see the red line does have a slight increase because we've got step increases and FTE increases. So it would have gone up a little bit because of that, but the difference is actually due to the change in rates.
That's
I know.
amazing.
Isn't that, I've started doing this at all my board meetings here for budget because, we've been talking about it and showing these really cool charts, but that's a number for you.
Yeah.
Not one that we can really talk about a lot, but
It's a good visual.
And then looking ahead, if you go from 1920 and go and look at that next 4-year period, there'll be an additional 2.7 million more. So, it's just an ugly number. And then here's a chart. I think I did it at second hour. I'm not sure if I did, but I know I did it when we were having those meetings with the unions. As far as the blue bar here is additional per student revenue in each of those years. And the red bar is the sum of what I had a stacked chart there, but that's the sum of the changes in special education funding shortfall, pension costs, health benefits, and step increases. So those costs over which we have very little, if any, in some cases, control. And you can see in all three of those numbers that we are working with in the budget document in all 3 years, though just those costs alone are greater than the increase in our property taxes. So I know, Laura, that's not on your list of good news.
No, we can just skip right past that one.
So, here we are. We have increasing enrollment in ADA, significant cost increases without corresponding increased revenues. We will confirm our property tax numbers in the fall after the bills go out in August. We'll put the one-time funds in the budget next time you see it. We've been addressing interim housing. I explained how we're doing that in developer fee fund where at all possible. We have to do a cash flow projection for every interim and budget, and we are showing that we will need to borrow even as much as $11 million in the fall because it's called a dry period, because remember, we get almost all of our money twice a year, right? December 10th, April 10th, and by December 10th, we've paid 5 months of payroll. So not unusual, not a cause for alarm. There will be a resolution that will need to come to the board. We have to give the county office and then they give the county treasurer enough warning that they need to liquidate and plan to loan funds to X, Y, and Z school districts. It's a standard procedure, but we have to be aware of it because they need lead time so that they've got cash on hand.
When was the last time we needed to do this? I don't think it's happened since I've been on the board.
Do you have any idea?
This district has not requested a tax anticipation note to borrow funds in the 6 years that I've been in Vernon County.
But we have to.
So district summary, this is only a blueprint. It changes every day. By the time it's adopted, it will be out of date and we'll have new assumptions and be posting budget transfers. Unfortunately, our budget has to be approved before the state's does. We haven't closed our books on this year, so we don't really know our beginning balance for next year. We don't know exactly how many students will show up or who we're going to hire and at what cost. So it's, like I said, it's our best, calculated numbers based on the data that we have today. But based on the indicated future budget reductions, our budget is sound. We have to take that responsibility to make the difficult decisions to make sure it stays that way. And then, of course, our educational experience for our students is what is at stake. Tonight, 2 public hearings. In 2 weeks, an approval and an adoption of the LCAP and the budget. We will bring back any material changes, which I think $800,000 is a nice material change. So we'll bring that back for the August board meeting, which is a requirement. Unaudited actuals will come to the board the first board meeting of September. And then we've talked about the first interim will reflect any changes in funding, any staffing changes, and we will have to have a discussion during that presentation on how we're going to continue to keep the budget balanced. Any additional questions? Thank you very much. I will not be at the meeting. No, I will be at the meeting in 2 weeks. Never mind. Sorry.
Good.
But I mean, hopefully, if no requested changes to anything, it'll just be the same document and a 1-minute item. That would be awesome.
Thank you, Terry.
Public comment?
Is there any public comment? Thank you, Dr. Yashar. On the budget presentation? No.
Cheers count as a public comment?
Tears or cheers?
Cheers.
At first I thought you said cheers, and I looked at you and went, yeah, you wouldn't be cheering.
I've heard nothing to cheer about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was looking at you confused.
I thought you said cheaters.
I said all of us had a hard
So-
time. We were all looking at you puzzled.
Got those
Sorry.
right here.
Yeah, I'm sorry too.
Okay, Lars Christensen, thank you.
All right. There's no easy segue after that sobering presentation, but I am very pleased to be here with Corey Damaris, President of TFT, this evening, to present to you 3 tentative agreements that have been ratified by TFT membership with regard to TFT TUHSD negotiations in the 2017-18 school year. We respectfully request your approval of those 3 TAs, and if more than happy to answer any questions associated with this agenda item.
Do board members have any questions?
I just want to thank the people who participated in negotiations on all sides. I know it was difficult and drawn out, and appreciate the good faith and the hard work that everybody put into it.
Thank you. Those words mean a lot to both Corey and I and our respective teams, and we will definitely pass that on to all the members of our teams.
Any public comment? No. Okay. Would anyone like to entertain a motion?
I move that we approve the tentative agreements between the district and TFT.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Very, very much appreciated. Next item, given the board's approval of our negotiated settlements in those areas that are listed on the agenda, with regard to Article 7, Salaries and Benefits, AB 1200, Assembly Bill 1200, requires that we publicly disclose our settlement with our bargaining association and report to the Marin County Office of Education. Terry Ryland, in the midst of all of our budget development, was kind enough to put the AB 1200 document together on our behalf, and we have that for you tonight. We ask that you approve it. I've already sent it on to the county for their review. So this is part of what we need to do to close all the loops. We will be bringing future AB 1200 documentation to you with regard to other settlements with bargaining associations that we have yet to complete.
I have a comment thank you, Terry, for doing the compensation provision, page 2 out of 10, line 10, total compensation cost for average represented employee. When we face the costs of any increases towards compensation, those numbers right now seem somewhat astronomical. But when you look at what the average employee may pocket in a year's time, $308, given what some of our children spend for lunch, would not pay for a month's lunch money for many of our students. So there's a perspective of, I think we have more to do here in terms of looking at a I know this, I must be nuts having this conversation after a $6 million deficit that we're looking at to close. However, in people's pockets, that's a pretty reasonable, if you will, or I'm overstating it. It's not much money.
And I think, Barbara, to your point that, we're playing the long game here. I, too, believe that we'll continue to negotiate in good faith with TFT. I personally think there are better days ahead. We've got some hard work to do in the next couple of years. And I don't want to speak for Corey's group, but they have a clear understanding of the challenges in front of us. And I do hope that over a longer period of time, beyond these next couple of years, that we'll continue to compensate all of our employees in a very fair, representative way of the, where we live and how we live and all the rest.
Is there any chance that number is eye-opening, can we confirm that number? Okay, I mean, it is eye-opening what you just said, Barbara, that $300 per employee? Can you confirm that or refute it,
Yeah.
please?
I'm not sure which line, but actually that's the number of FTEs.
Yeah, that-
308 is the number of FTEs.
Yeah, that's how many teachers that,
Oh, I just
at
totally
that
read that wrong.
$136,000, $303.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So basically, if you look at the middle column, it shows average compensation going from 136.6 to 138.4. So that's an increase of about $1,800 per.
$1,800?
Yeah.
per?
That still is probably less than the lunch money of the average student.
I don't
that
think so.
given year.
All right, my mistake.
No, but
Not
it's-
my kids.
None of mine.
Excuse me, that's a gross error.
No, that's right. That's why it did sound.
Thank you for clarifying that, Terry. That's,
However, the point still, I think, remains over the spread, $1,800 after taxes, if that's after taxes.
That's before taxes.
So,
Yeah.
I don't think we can pat ourselves on the back for we're being prudent, we're being reasonable, given our circumstances, but it's not out of largesse or excess.
I think it's also fair to mention, and not just for teachers, but for classified personnel and administrative personnel, just the STRS and/or PERS costs alone take a big bite out of that salary increase. I mean, that's the reality.
It's roughly about $70 a month more, so I'll take a guess, is what we just got.
$70.
And
$70 from 1,800? Oh, I see, when you divide by 12 and after taxes, okay.
STRS and PERS, yeah, I mean, that takes a big bite out of it. I'll use myself as a quick example. I had a salary increase from year 1 to year 2 in my employ, and when you calculate it out, it was a $23 per month raise. I mean, I'm grateful for it, but I mean, that's what it became, was in actual hard cash in my pocket, $23 more a month, because my STRS increased to a great degree.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. It's always a good reminder.
And, I saw something on the internet a couple days ago. I should have forwarded it to Corey. But, we see these charts, and California teachers are ranked pretty high in salary relative to the other states. But this one factored in the cost of living in the different states. And California didn't do very well. We were well down on the list, I think in the, high 30s. instead of, what are we, like 4, 5, or 6 in salary. So those figures we see about teachers' salaries in California are really misleading because of the costs of living in California.
That's right.
So President Lundgren, I will need you to please approve the AB 1200 document.
Okay.
Thank you. Took me a while.
I
and
move
Thank you.
to approve the public disclosure in accordance with AB 1200 and tentative agreement between the Tam Union District and the NTFT.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next
Thank
item.
you very much. Next item, I believe, is 17G.
Correct.
So, as you're aware, last year, with the growth in our school district, we added a group of CSEA employees on a part-time basis at our 3 comprehensive school sites. That was a 1-year memorandum of understanding with CSEA to bring in those extra positions. We would like to extend that MOU for an additional year, with the exception we will not be bringing on an additional part-time IT person this year. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as to specifics of hours per position and what school site. But you have the MOU in your attachments.
Any questions? Any public comment?
And Terry, if you could just please confirm that these already have been budgeted, correct?
They have been. They weren't originally,
Uh-huh.
the decision made after that, we have them.
Great, thank you. Can I ask for a motion to approve the TUHSD CSEA Memorandum of Understanding?
I move we approve the TUHSD CSEA Memorandum of Understanding.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next meeting is June 26th. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.